So I'm going to start out with, what did you want to be when you were a little girl?
Well, I had a few ideas. First, I wanted to be a nun because I was religious until the nuns and the priests started becoming abusive at school and were telling us that we were all superior. So I decided I didn't want to be one of them anymore. And I just had a real sense of wanting to care about people. So then that's why I decided to become a nurse. But my main goal was that I tried to find a way to care about people in the world. That was, I think, more than even a nurse, just be a caring person and have a job that was caring.
Wow, what do you think influenced you to have that kind of thinking, that kind of empathy?
Well, I think I was born very empathetic because my earliest memories are that. So, and I didn't have role models that were caring. My parents were abusive. My father was very violent and my mother was very selfish. And I think I decided to be opposite to them. So I guess in a positive, I took my childhood experiences of violence and narcissism from my mother and said I will be the opposite to them. But I think before even that awareness, I think I was just born I think some children just have a natural propensity for being caring, and I believe I was one of those children.
Well, that's good to have that kind of self-awareness for sure, especially if you're going to take on the opposite role of your parents. You're going to have some path to go on. So,
yes, I watched everything they did and said I wouldn't do that. I'll do the opposite. I can remember very little, like when I was 3 and 4, thinking like that.
wow, that's amazing. So how is that thinking of empathy translated into what you're doing in your life today?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you another thing that happened to me when I was 7, at the same age when I started to really decide that I wanted to be a nun or a nurse or someone caring. I was laying in a field one day and looking up at the clouds, and I had this image, a vision come to me of when I was very old. I was like late 90s or in the early 100s, I knew that. And I was standing in a room with a lot of people, and I was talking about something that I had done around caring, and they all were clapping, and I knew that was the end of my life. So I thought everybody had those things happen to them, and I really didn't tell anybody. Well, my parents were too interested in themselves anyways, and children don't usually talk about those things with other people unless they have an interested adult, and I really didn't have one in my life. And I kind of forgot about it till I started working with Jean Sarson on persons against non-state torture, and then I thought, oh, that's what that vision was about, because this is such hard work. Because by being a nurse and a community health nurse and a public health nurse and learning about family and families' lives, of course, I saw some very difficult situations. So that kind of prepared me for when Jean and I started our private practice in nursing. And then we started with the one woman who identified as being tortured. And so I learned from her that her family were torturers, and then I learned that there were many other families in the province who were torturing their children, and then I've learned that non-state torture is common all around the world. So it's taken me to places that I really didn't expect to go in some ways, but yet my vision told me that I would have a big story to tell. And I do believe this is a global reality that's still invisible, mostly invisible, that needs to be told. It's been 26 years of activism and caring and counseling and research and education, and now we just finished our manuscript for the book that we've written. Hopefully we'll be able to get it published and get the word out in a different way so that more people will learn about non-state torture and that children are indeed born into families where their parents torture them. And then we can help more children and eventually hopefully prevent the the crime altogether, or start to prevent it anyways. That's my long-term goal till I'm that old woman standing in that room talking.
What do you think what kind of an impact do you think this has had on your life?
The work that I'm doing?
Yes.
And the caring? Well, it's had a huge impact on my life. Well, it's, first of all, I think when you choose when you're little to be a caring person, it impacts everything you do. It impacts all your decisions and all your actions. I always lived my life imagining that I was someone else was watching me, or I was an example to other children. So I always tried to hold myself to a high standard of being a good person. So I think it's impacted me that way, and also it's gotten me into a lot of trouble because as a good person, I won't stand by and watch something happen. I stand up for others, or I get involved in challenging the system. So as a whistleblower, it's not an easy road. It's been a hard road, but I don't regret any of it. And it's isolating because not everyone wants to associate with a whistleblower because when you're making a stand on things, people that aren't comfortable with that will walk away from you. So it's been isolating in some ways, but it's also been a life that I'm proud of. I wouldn't change my life. It was hard on my family when my children were young, when Gina and I started this work, and my husband, because he was frightened and didn't want me to do the work. He wanted me to stop. So it was difficult in our marriage. I told him I wasn't going to change who I was. So, we debated about divorce for a while, and he finally stayed with it. Now he's very proud of what I'm doing. So it's been worth it to stay with it. I don't think he even remembers many of those very difficult years when we had professional complaints laid against us and tried to have our license taken away and things. But for my children, I think I've been a role model to not give up when something is difficult and to stand for doing the right thing. So I'm hoping that helps them in their life long term. So being a role model is important for my children as well. And I think it's given me a lot of connections with good people too, because other advocates and role models, I have connections with them in different parts of the world, so they're lovely people to know. And of course, all the survivors of non-state torture that Gene and I have met have been tremendous women, because to have endured such atrocity and to remain a good person, I can't imagine a more difficult task, so I have great respect for them. And it's given quality to my life. It's promoted travel. I've been to many different countries talking to survivors and speaking about the work that we do. So it's provided a global format, and I've always been a global person anyways. From childhood, I always thought about the world and children in other countries. So I'm pleased that I can live in a global culture, the co-culture of activists, of trying to change the world for women and children, girls' equality.
Could you go back and say something about what happened, some of the things that were levied against you with them? You mentioned that, you just touched on it briefly, but just some of the things that you feel were, used against you to stop you from creating new language and creating awareness and things like that.
Right. Well, there's great social resistance, first of all, because in 1993, when Gina and I first started and we started talking about parents deliberately torturing their children, people thought we were mentally ill. And I don't mean that as an exaggeration. There's been women who I respect now who came to me later and said they really did think we had a mental illness, that we were talking about delusions, and they didn't think that such reality could happen, because it wasn't in the news or no one was talking about it, so they thought we had some kind of a mental illness, so they thought we were crazy. So people would say, well, they mean well, but they really don't know what they're talking about. So there was a lot of that kind of talk in the community and at the UN and different places we went. So that was that kind of discreditation. And then there was the alleged perpetrators of one of the women that we were helping laid formal complaints to our Nursing Professional Association. with the threat that we'd have our nursing licenses withdrawn. And if that occurred, then of course my whole career would be destroyed, and my livelihood and my family's livelihood and my children's future, because my income is crucial to, or was crucial to them and their education. So I was really fighting for my family when we had the complaints laid against us. We won both malicious complaints, and actually had lobbied and had the nursing profession include a malicious complaint as a category in the Nursing Act afterwards, because that wasn't something that was considered before we went through it. And we've had women's groups that supported us for some period of time, NGOs, and then they decided that they didn't want to support us anymore for different reasons, so we were either blocked from doing any more work or asked to leave the group. And that was really, I found that really painful, because I began to trust these women in the women's groups and believe that they cared and supported about our work, but they found it too controversial after a while and blocked it. So I found that not only a block on a professional level, I found it very hurtful as a woman, having other women deliberately block us and ask us to leave. So I've learned to develop a tougher skin around oppressed group behavior and know that not all women are supportive, like the myth that is out there. I've learned that that's not true.
Well, thank goodness you had Jean.
Yes. Oh, we wouldn't have done the work. We wouldn't have succeeded if there was just one of us, I don't believe. There would have been too many obstacles for one person.
How did you meet Jean?
We were working together in the same office. I started in 1989 and she came in 1990. Before that, I had organized a little workshop in town on sexual abuse, and she came to that, and we spoke for a minute, but we really didn't have much of a conversation. And then the following year, we met at work, and we just hit it off from the beginning, because we started talking about our childhoods, and because we were both from family violence, and I couldn't find anybody back then to really talk about that conversation. We just talked about it freely, and it wasn't long after our beginning conversations that Jean mentioned that she'd always wanted to have a nursing practice. And I said, well, I don't think I'm ready for that yet. But after talking to her for a couple of years, and then we went and did some more training in BC, we started our practice in January of 93. So it was about 3 years before we started it.
That's great. That's super great, because that's one of the things that I think Dianne and I certainly realize is that there's great value in that kind of friendship, to have those shared shared experiences.
Yeah,
yes.
And shared expenses too, because we pay for
That's
everything
true.
ourselves.
That's right. That's right.
True.
It was a Freudian slip, but it was true. So.
It worked, yeah.
So what do you think in all the things that you're talking about? And I admit, we had a long conversation with Jean, so we have a lot of background on, but not at the same story level that you're telling. And that's why we wanted to interview both of you separately, because we felt like it would be a very powerful story by two different people telling it in their own way. But I wonder, you talked about being in the field and looking up at the sky and having a vision of your life, and that certainly must have been a defining moment. But I wonder if there are other moments in life that have really defined you and your career, or even you as a woman, how you moved on, whatever that is.
Yes. Well, I have a few. The first one was when I was 4, and I was the oldest child, and I had a brother, 18 months younger than me, and then my baby sister was born. She's 4 years younger than me. And with family violence, with every child that comes along, it usually exacerbates the violence, so it gets worse. And I was already super responsible for my mother. It was just so burdensome. I can't even, I won't go into it now, but it was just, every day was a grueling day. And my mother, I remember when she brought my sister home, my father was he was more violent than ever, because now there was 3, and it just seemed like such a horrible time. Well, it was horrible. It didn't just seem that. And the little bit of any kind of attention that I got from my mother was totally gone by then. And I can remember we lived in a road, a town, so I went outside by myself and I walked down the street and I looked up at this tree, and all of a sudden I just felt this huge light all around me. And it was like a flash of awareness, I guess, is what it was. And it took me a while to understand it over my life. But what I realized is that it was me knowing that what my parents were doing was wrong. I was only little, but I learned very young that adults can be wrong. And I knew that what they were doing was wrong to me, and it was wrong to my siblings. And it guided me through my life, because I was never afraid to stand up to authority, because I never had a blind faith or loyalty in adults or power over me, because I understood that adults were just like children in the sense that they were human and equal to me. And in fact, I felt like I was a better person than my parents were. So that was a defining moment for me. And then when my first child was born, that was another defining moment, because I just felt I had a big responsibility to do better than my parents had, and now it was my job to show that to him and to whoever else I had. I have 3 children, a son and 2 daughters. So having children was a huge marker for me. I had to do a lot of my own personal work and get rid of all the triggers of all the violence that I endured, and it changed my life having my children. And I do believe I'm a good mother. And then, of course, the complaint process was another defining moment for me, because I learned how cruel people can be. I think the non-state torture, although it was horrible, I learned about the Holocaust when I was little, I wasn't so shocked about the non-state torture. I just had to reframe the reality that parents could be just the same as Nazis. That's where I did put it, because I think if you understand evil behavior when you're little, and like I paid a lot of attention to the Holocaust when I was 7 or 8, it didn't shock me so much. I just had to reframe all that. But what I didn't understand was how destructive bystanders can be. I've never really concretized that in my own life. So to have a nursing organization believe the perpetrators, alleged perpetrators, I should say, and I knew that they were coming in to destroy my life and Jean's life and our children's lives and our family life. That was so shocking to me that I got pneumonia, and I really do believe that I can remember being in kind of a delirium state in the pneumonia and deciding whether I really wanted to live or die. Did I want to live in a world where women could treat other women like this or not? And I do believe if I'd said no, I could have probably gone to the pneumonia might not have subsided. So that was another defining moment for me, was just knowing, yes, I am going to live in this world, and I'm going to fight it, and I'm going to expose it. So those are the 3, I guess, that really come to my mind.
It's interesting to hear you say that about I'm going to live in this world, and I'm going to, it's not good, and I'm going to expose it, because each of us, including Dianne and I, we interviewed each other for the book. And when we talk about defining moments, it almost always comes to something like that, where we looked in
interesting.
Yeah, I looked in the mirror and I said, nobody's coming for me. Nobody's coming to help me. I can only do it myself, and I got to decide to live. And, there's that. It always comes back to that, where we make the decision we're going forward, no matter what anybody does or says. And that is the power of our activism in our lives. That's why Dianne and I have done the work we've done together and apart for so long, is because we believe we all have those defining moments. But people aren't paying attention. And a lot of it is what you're talking about when you talk about the fact that people are able to disassociate and they just continue to walk like they are living, but they're not. And it just amazes me it's distressful actually to watch people and realize that they're just disassociating. They don't have any idea what the world is or what it's about, or it's so destructive. It's the thing you said about bystanders.
The bystander is it never is like, if I look at what's happening now in the States with the Republican Party and the people that are just closing their eyes and letting Trump just walk over the country, and then you look at Hong Kong and the people there that are standing there fighting, like it shows the difference. You know, when we get too much privilege too, I think we get complacent. You know, I feel North America, we're more complacent, and because for Canada, for us to get women mobilized to stand with us, it's been really, really hard. I thought for sure when we started telling the stories in the early 90s, people would be so outraged it would be long gone, that we wouldn't be still fighting to get this reality out. So it's been a shock. But every time I get a blocker, I get more determined and get stronger. Yeah. So I just keep growing with the process.
Well, the challenge, I think, is the disassociation that you've identified. But I also think that we haven't moved beyond expecting women to make the changes, that we haven't held particularly white men accountable to say, you must speak out against other men who are doing this behavior.
That's right.
We've been saying these things since the beginning, since, if you believe in Adam and Eve, it started there, and everybody just looks up and rolls their eyes and says, oh, those women complaining and whining again, and act like we've made change when we haven't. So that's my opinion. I'm sticking to it, Linda. But
yeah,
well,
I certainly don't think enough women have stood yet either. You know?
No, that's right.
I think that if enough of us stood, then the men would have to give in, really. But
I totally agree. You know, if we could just get a lot of women to not shop at Walmart, or not go to a film that's horrible, or like the Harvey Weinstein guy, you know.
Right.
If you're absolutely right about that, but I think that's that disassociation issue again. Yeah. So anyway, you and I and Dianne and Jean we could solve the problems of the world. We really could. We've got to.
Well, you know what I go on too is the change, or the transformational theory, that it takes the 2% to get the path plotted through, and then another 8% to start it really being launched. So, you know, I think we're at kind of the 10% place now, and maybe moving into the 30%. It takes quite a while. It takes about 25 years to get an issue move forward. So I feel that we're getting there now. And, you know, it's a lot for two people, because it was only 2 months for so long.
I'm sorry for laughing. It just sounds so great. I mean, it's like it's a lot for 2 people. Yes, it is.
I sometimes get, like, I haven't got my spare bedroom rearranged yet. I have stress thinking about that. And yet I can think about global transformation easy in a flash. Like, it's such a contradiction.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and it gets me in trouble many days in my life. So my husband.
You have a good sense of humor in all this.
That's right. You have to have a sense of humor. My husband will say, "Focus, Annie, focus." I like.
You're focusing on humor. That's healthy.
Yes. No, I say, listen, I am focused. It's just not on what you want me to focus on.
Exactly. That's right.
I want to live in a different world, and by God, I'm never going to stop focusing on that. So,
you know, you talked about.
It becomes your spirit, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
It's part of my spirit.
Yeah.
You talked about how, you know, the women, you know, can be so cruel to each other, and it was kind of funny. Now, I guess it's funny. It's kind of the same thing when Annie and I first started Women's PeacePower Foundation. We had an office in what was an old train depot. And she was married. I was divorced at the time, but I had a gentleman that I was dating, you know, I had been dating for a while, but yet people didn't know what to do with us. So you know what they thought that the most horrible thing they could do was they labeled us the 2 lesbians from the train depot.
Oh my God, yeah, isn't it something? People thought Jean and I were lesbians too, eh? You know, we're both married with children. Like, nothing wrong with being a lesbian.
No, but it's like they think that's an insult.
Everybody's lesbian, like that's a way to degrade lesbians and all women, you know?
Yeah,
like,
how dare women?
It's what?
How dare women, try and do anything together,
It was the women. It was the women saying that.
It was.
But then we would just say, why don't you come for a cup of tea and we'll talk? And they were like horrified.
That's right. Oh no, that'd be too scary. It's really gonna label you.
Yeah, well, we did fix them though. We joined the Junior Women's League and we showed up every month for lunch. So,
of course, they didn't really interact with us.
Place, eh?
Yeah, they didn't really interact with us, but we went every week, every month, just to.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, being visible is important.
Yeah. We didn't think of it like that. We just thought, hey, you're going to have to deal with this one way or the other, so get over it.
Yeah.
So how do you think, I think you're talking about this, but how do you think that the things that you've learned in your experiences and your dreams as a little girl have really influenced your life right now and maybe into the future?
Well, I have a very strong core, ethical core. Like it's just iron firm. And I just won't waver off that for anybody, regardless, like for my husband or my children, or, it's just such an ethical core. If they ask me to do something that would, like for instance, my husband asking me to stop this work, I just wouldn't do it. I knew that if I did that, if I gave away my ethics, I'd be giving away myself. So I've always stayed true to myself. I think that's the best advice I've ever been given. And it's never let me down. It might make it hard at times, but I feel free and I can trust myself, and I know that people have no leverage to discredit the work that I do or that Jean does, because she's the same way. If you don't, try to get manipulated or sabotaged or waver off an ethical path, they have no hook in to discredit you. So I find that's been really important in my life, and it's really paid off, because there's just been no way that anybody has been able to discredit our work, because they don't have any place to start at it. Our intentions are good. My intentions are true, and I'm a firm believer in feminism and equality, and all my beliefs are all rooted in my ethics. So I think that it's like a guiding post on my guiding post in life. So I know it'll take me into the future. So I'm not afraid of the future. I think it reduces fear when you have trust in your own path. You might not know where you're headed, because oftentimes it's like plodding in the fog when you're developing a path. But you can trust that whatever happens will be okay, because you're doing it for the right reasons. So it gives me a sense of freedom and joy. I have joy and pleasure in my life, because I just have such great pleasure in making a difference, that it gives me great joy, and it brings quality to my life that I know I wouldn't have otherwise.
Well, what advice would you give to a young activist?
I get asked that quite a bit from young activists. I'll be practical first, that to get some kind of a job or an income outside of the activism, because they don't often pay us to change the world. So you don't want to depend on it for an income. You might be lucky enough to find a job that has an activist component in it that you can do and get paid to do, but that doesn't happen very often. So get a career and try to get it maybe in something that's tied into your activism, like social policy or human rights work or something, but get a career that has an income, because women need to have money and to have power to be able to move forward. That way they can't stop your work, because with Jean and I, our work is all independently funded, so no one could ever pull the rug from underneath us by taking our money away and stopping our work. So it's kept us independent that way. And always pick something that you truly have strong passion for, not something you think you should do, because it's going to be hard if you have an activist path. You're going against the stream. So you have to really believe in it and want to speak the truth about it, and have love for the issue or passion for the issue, because there'll be hard days. And learn as much as you can about that issue so that you're grounded in facts and reality, and people can't stop you in your path because you've said something that's incorrect, especially when you're first getting the issue forward, because there'd be many people coming in trying to discredit you. So if you're giving inaccurate information, that will really harm your journey. So really know as much as you can. Try to know everything you can about it so that you're really grounded in a foundation of a knowledge base of the issue that you're advocating for. And have fun with it as well. I think it's important to try to build fun into it, because otherwise it can get grueling. Like if we go traveling somewhere, we always try to have a little bit of fun before and after an educational session or a lobbying session or something. And, build beauty in your life, because if you're dealing with a gruesome issue like non-state torture, it can get pretty dark if you don't have other beautiful images, like whatever your hobbies are, flowers or painting or music, so that you have a well-rounded life. You're not just totally immersed in the darkness of what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's really describing a well-lived life, for sure. Well, so
take care of yourself, because it's hard work. You have to take care of yourself.
yes,
Physically and emotionally. Talk your emotions out, because it can be shocking or hurtful or fearful or whatever your emotions are. People forget that we should talk about our emotions and get emotional support from a colleague or a friend or someone. Otherwise, you can get overwhelmed emotionally and it harms your physical health, and then you can end up becoming very sick as an activist if you're not taking care of your emotions.
that's so true. Well, did you have any other advice to give before we end the conversation?
Well, I guess just believe in yourself. And like I said, be true to yourself. But that means believing in yourself, because others will try to tell you that you're crazy. Don't let them convince you of that. Believe in yourself.
Okay, that's so true. You're quite an inspiration, Linda.
Well, thank you.
Very good.